All our stories are created for entertainment purposes only.
I sought revenge on my ex-wife for the way she ruined my life. When I unexpectedly encountered her at my new workplace, it stirred up intense anger in me, and I had the urge to do some unspeakable things right then and there. 7 years hadn't been enough time for me to fully recover from the damage she inflicted on my life. I lost everything and had to start over from scratch after she turned everyone against me. I had even relocated to a different state in an attempt to escape her. But there she was, sitting at my new company where I held a senior executive manager position. My history with Charlene was long and ugly, and I would have been perfectly content never crossing paths with her again after our divorce. I met Charlene when I was young and had a successful startup business. We got married just a year after we started dating because, well, she became pregnant with my child. Our relationship began to deteriorate after the birth of our daughter. Despite our baby being very young, Charlene spent most of her time at her parents' house. I raised concerns about leaving the baby with a nanny, but my complaints fell on deaf ears. I even informed her parents, but they sided with her, claiming I was pressuring her while she was dealing with depression. Over time, our communication worsened, and we only discussed matters related to our child. When our daughter was a few months old, I discovered that she wasn't biologically mine, and Charlene had been having an affair with a colleague. That very night, I kicked her out of the house, and a few days later, I filed for divorce. During this period, I was the sole provider since she didn't want to return to work after giving birth. Despite the circumstances, I didn't cut her financial support because I understood it wasn't the child's fault. Legally, I shouldn't have had to give her anything in the divorce. I had evidence of her deception spanning years, but she counteracted with false accusations of emotional offense and control. Her parents even testified with false claims about her showing up at their house with bruises. In the end, due to her fabricated evidence and the bias that often favors women in such cases, I had to relinquish half of my business and the family home. It's a stark reminder of the challenges men can face in such situations. My thriving business took a major hit due to the false accusations against me. My entire family sided with her because she's always been a convincing actress, leaving me with no family support, a failing business, and a hefty settlement payment. The town became a place where nobody wanted to do business with me or offer me a job, so I had to make a move, carrying a substantial debt from trying to salvage my business. She, on the other hand, enjoyed the high life, spending my money and holding on to my house. For about a year, I found work at a well-paying company, but most of my earnings went toward paying off the debt. I stopped trying to pry into her life and focused on rebuilding my own. After 7 years post-divorce, I had risen to a prominent position as one of the top executives in a highly profitable company. My company had just acquired another company, and my responsibility was overseeing the CEO of that firm, aiding in the merger and integration of the company into our brand. On my first day back there, I unexpectedly came across her. She appeared older, but her essence remained unchanged. The sight of her stirred up immense anger, and I even contemplated asking my company to remove her from her role. I had been estranged from most of my family for years because they wrongly believed I was an offensive man. They conveniently ignored the fact that I never laid a hand on her and that she manipulated me into marriage. Following our initial meeting, she paid a visit to my office, putting on a pleasant facade and offering to give me a tour, as if we were old friends. I sensed that she knew she was in a difficult position, hoping to soften me up. I promptly declined her offer, but she lingered in my thoughts throughout the day. I desperately wanted to terminate her employment, but I couldn't do it legally without cause. From that point forward, my primary objective at the office was to make her life miserable. Based on her employee file, she had been working there for the past 2 years and had been performing adequately. I surmised that her ill-gotten funds had finally run out, so I went out of my way to torment her. To start, I handed her a handwritten note stating that even though her boss had suggested a verbal warning for her tardiness, my word carried far more weight, so I issued her a formal warning. She cited her daughter's illness as an excuse, but I couldn't care less. Later that day, she made a minor mistake in a report I had requested from her. I had her redo the entire report and reprint it, fully aware that the printer was broken. I knew it would take her a while, and she'd be stuck in a stuffy room filled with dust with no air conditioning. As the workday was coming to an end, I made her stay back in our spare office to do something utterly pointless, purely to waste her time. A few days later, our assistant from the other company joined us, but there was a shortage of offices. I ensured that she gave up her office and relocated to a tiny, stuffy room with no ventilation, right in the middle of summer when the heat was unbearable. When she had to pack her things, she was so furious that I thought she might explode. I overheard her venting to some colleagues about me, which only motivated me to assign her even more work that she couldn't handle. She constantly worked through lunch breaks, and I kept piling on demands. She was also in the running for a promotion that everyone in the office coveted. Despite her exceptional performance in recent months and her boss's high praise, I suggested that the promotion should go to someone who had been with the company longer. I knew this would infuriate her. After the promotion recipient was announced, she stormed into my office, vowing to make me pay for what I had done. A few days later, my past with my ex-wife became the talk of the office, thanks to an anonymous email that was sent to everyone. My superiors already knew about my divorce, and I had no criminal record, so they simply asked me to stay home for a few days. I enlisted one of the tech guys to trace the email, and it led straight back to her. I filed a complaint against her for slander, which caused her significant trouble within the company. Our company had strict rules against slander and gossiping about employees' private lives. If I had been on the committee, I would have advocated for her termination, but I had to recuse myself due to my close involvement in the case. She had to stay home for several days because of the email she sent. I almost lost my position in the company due to the incident, but fortunately, I didn't. I left her alone for a while, contemplating how to get her to leave the company and stay out of my life. Seeing her every morning was painful for me. Surprisingly, she ended up sabotaging herself, leading to her departure from the company, and I didn't have to get my hands dirty. Here's what transpired. At the end of the year, the company organized a fundraiser a few weeks before closing for the year. I wasn't directly involved in planning it. My role was to oversee how everything was going. It was also the day the company was announcing its name change. We had a strict company policy against alcohol or drugs, especially when clients were around. But as the event kicked off, I found myself dealing with a series of problems, most of which were coming from her department responsible for the presentation. While the meeting was in progress, some of the interns began acting strangely, as if they were either high or drunk. One intern even sat at a table reserved for a company investor and fell asleep. It was clear something was off, so I instructed my assistant to discreetly remove her from the sight of the event attendees. I could smell alcohol on some of the interns, and the CEO seemed to sense something was amiss as well, judging by the panic in his expression. I didn't want to involve Charlene, but I needed her assistance with tasks the interns were supposed to handle. When I asked for her help, she refused, claiming she wasn't some lowly intern as I perceived her to be. Frustration mounted, and I suggested she come to my office with me to avoid causing a scene. Her anger escalated, and she insisted I wasn't her boss. Her words were slurred, and her eyes appeared glassy, which was highly unusual for her. In a hurry, I informed the CEO about the situation and left him to manage the event and keep the guests distracted while I tried to get to the bottom of the chaos. We conducted breathalyzer tests on the interns who had denied consuming alcohol in the first place. Predictably, they all failed. I asked them to reveal the source of the alcohol to avoid further trouble, but they were unwilling to cooperate. I made it clear that we would likely terminate their contracts if they continued to withhold information. Finally, one of them admitted they had stolen wine from my office. I was furious and ready to fire them, but then they dropped a bombshell. They confessed that my ex-wife had sent them to grab the wine to share before the event. I couldn't fathom why she would take such a risk, knowing well the company's strict policy on staff consuming alcohol. Even I wasn't allowed to drink at work, as it was a precaution for those who had to drive to and from work events, potentially facing legal trouble if caught drinking. I summoned her to my office and urged her to confess to her actions since there were already witnesses. She admitted to messing up, claiming she needed to drink because she had just found out her boyfriend was cheating on her. But I wasn't about to fall for her excuses. I couldn't trust a word that came out of her mouth. It seemed pretty clear to me that she wanted the interns to mess up the event by getting them drunk. And guess who would take the fall if the event went south? Me, of course. I didn't mince words when I confronted her about it. I made it crystal clear that she was on thin ice and that her job was in jeopardy. With 2 prior warnings on her record, A third strike would mean her job was on the line. I didn't hold back in detailing the humiliation she'd face once everyone found out about her attempt to sabotage the event she had worked so hard on. It was kind of satisfying to see her squirm and scramble for excuses. I told her to head home for the rest of the day and we'd address the matter further the next day. In my office, she started crying, pleading that she needed the job and didn't intend for the interns to steal the client's wine. She claimed she had no idea they would drink so much and promised to pay it all back if I just let her off the hook. I did the math for her and she was visibly shocked by the amount. She began begging me to drop the issue, mentioning how she wanted to fix things between us given our complicated history. I couldn't help but remind her of how her past actions had left me with a ruined reputation, no home, and no shared custody of our daughter. She had moved to a different city and taken everything from me. Once upon a time, I might have cared or felt sorry for her given her messed up life, but those days were long gone. She went home, and I returned to managing our fundraiser. By the end of the day, I had informed her superiors about her actions, and they were furious, eager to fire her immediately. However, I had a different plan in mind. I relished the power to determine her fate within the company, just as she had once controlled my destiny. The following morning, she sent in a resignation email, hoping for an immediate departure. But I had other intentions. By that point, everyone at the office knew what she had done, and she was facing the music. I insisted she serve a 2-week notice before her departure. The company also sent her an invoice for the stolen alcohol, and I threatened to press theft charges if she didn't repay the debt. She completed her 2 weeks, but I ensured they were anything but pleasant for her. I did her a solid by piling on a ton of work, ensuring she wouldn't have to face her coworkers who were far from thrilled with her. They had put in a lot of effort to organize the event after all. During her final 2 weeks at the office, she was clearly miserable. On the last day, as she packed up her belongings, she paid me the money she owed for the wine. She seemed to suggest I should be content now that she was jobless. I reminded her that resigning had been her choice, and it allowed her to retain at least some of her dignity, which she might not have if I had terminated her. When she finally departed from the company, I felt an immense sense of satisfaction. It seemed like she had lost everything, much like I once did. Perhaps she could start anew at a different company, but she couldn't use our company as a reference when seeking employment. Months passed, and I had pretty much forgotten about her. That was until I spotted her on the streets among the jobless and homeless individuals asking for assistance. To be honest, she looked unrecognizable and appeared to have hit rock bottom, holding a sign that begged for employment or help. I couldn't help but wonder how she had fallen so far, considering the life she used to lead. Even when I lost everything, I didn't end up on the streets. In a way, it felt like karma had come back around in her case, a kind of poetic justice for the lies she had told about me, which had cost me everything I had. It seemed like another one of those stories where karma had its say. Now, I'm curious to hear your thoughts down in the comments. Do you think I went too far in how I treated my ex-wife? Or do you believe she deserved everything that came her way?
All right, that was a fun story. Now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned and let's dive in.
I'm a 29-year-old woman, and I've been with my husband, who is 30, for almost 7 years. We got married quickly after we met, and we have 2 kids together. He's a wonderful man, handsome, well-educated, has a good-paying job, and he's always treated me with respect. My close friends and family often remind me how fortunate I am to have him and what a great guy he is. I used to think of us as soulmates. However, about a year ago, I made a terrible mistake. I went out with a group of friends for a birthday party, got extremely drunk, and ended up sleeping with a man who had been flirting with me all night. It was the first time in years that I felt so carefree, and I can't even explain why I did it. But the moment I realized what I had done, I ordered a taxi home and tearfully confessed everything to my husband. I felt overwhelming regret and self-loathing. Initially, he remained silent and calm, but he told me he wanted a divorce. After a lot of pleading, we decided to go to counseling. However, during our counseling sessions, he never seems engaged. He just sits there, scrolling on his phone. When asked about his feelings or what he can do to improve our relationship, he responds negatively, sometimes with hurtful comments directed at me. Most of the time, he doesn't seem to care and remains silent, even when we're trying to involve him in the conversation. I've spent the past year doing everything I can to save our marriage. I've even agreed to do what I dislike just to please him. I've been taking care of all the household chores, cooking, and cleaning without any help from him. I've fulfilled his requests, no matter what they were. He has moments of rage during which he calls me terrible names, sometimes within earshot of our children. However, he always treats our kids with love and never speaks poorly of me in front of them. Sometimes, if I don't meet his demands, such as engaging in certain acts, he threatens to divorce me or mentions my past infidelity, blaming me for everything. He says marrying me was a mistake and uses hurtful words. I also know that he has been communicating with other women. When I confront him about it, he immediately brings up my past infidelity. I don't have any concrete evidence that he's been meeting other people behind my back. All I want is for things to return to the way they used to be. Once, when I mentioned seeing a message from another woman on his phone, he grabbed my hand, took me to the main hall, and pointed to the door, telling me the exit was right there if I wanted to leave. He made it clear that he didn't care about my thoughts or feelings. I feel like I've lost the caring, loving husband I once had, and he's turned into someone I don't recognize. I love him deeply, and I can't imagine being with anyone else. I regret my mistake every single day, and I just want my family to be whole again. I don't know if I can save this marriage, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I'm not exactly sure what I'm seeking by sharing this. Maybe I just needed to get it off my chest, but I wish I could turn back time and undo all of this. Edit. I forgot to mention more details about our therapy sessions. I want to clarify that I took full responsibility for my actions and didn't blame him. It wasn't until the therapist suggested that my husband might have done things that pushed me away, possibly leading to my infidelity, that things took a different turn during our therapy sessions. I'm considering changing therapists to see if we can make progress. I genuinely want to make this work. Update. I confronted my husband today, and as many people suggested, I had a feeling he might not want to try anymore and just wants to move on. At first, I approached him to explain how I understand his pain, and that if he no longer wants to work on our marriage and wants to move forward, I'll accept it and let him go. I expressed my deep love for him and how it will always be there. He stood there in silence, then came up to hug me, and we both started crying. It was the first time in a long while that I felt genuine affection from him. After a few minutes of hugging and tears, he let go and asked me to sit down with him. He began telling me that he still loves me wholeheartedly and cares deeply for our children. He finds it tough to move past what happened. He mentioned that he experiences moments of intense anger, not just because of his resentment for my actions, but also due to vivid mental images of what I did, which haunt him. He can't shake those images from his mind. He explained that while he had women flirting with him over the years and opportunities to be unfaithful, his love for me and our children always outweighed any fleeting pleasures. He insisted that he couldn't have done to me what I did to him because his love for me was too deep to hurt me in that way. Hearing him say this broke me down even further. He went on to express that something inside him feels broken and irreparable. He admitted to chatting with other women in recent months, but emphasized that he never engaged in any physical or romantic activities with them because it didn't feel right. My suggestion that he could move forward was the first time he felt like I truly understood his inner turmoil and the extent of his emotional pain. He mentioned that he's unsure about our future, but, for the time being, he wants to be single and focus on self-improvement away from me. I assured him that I would agree to sign the divorce papers if he wanted a divorce, and that I didn't want anything from him. I insisted that whatever he brought into the marriage remained his, and I didn't want any financial support, even though he earns more than me. Hearing this made him cry, and he expressed hope that he could forgive me someday. He believes that time apart will be beneficial for both of us and allow us to reflect on our lives. He plans to consult a lawyer and bring the divorce papers in about a week. I have no intention of meeting someone new after the divorce, and I don't want to either. I genuinely hope he returns to me one day so we can restore our old family. I deeply regret my actions and feel immense remorse. realizing that I've lost the one person who truly is my soulmate. It seems that divorce is inevitable. Story 3. My boyfriend and I have been in a relationship for about 6 months now, and he's a fantastic guy. We hardly ever argue, and he's generally very laid back. However, there's a situation with my friend Matt that's causing some tension. Matt and I have been close friends for many years, and we share a deep passion for our dogs and our dog-related careers. Our days are mostly filled with activities like hiking, running, training, agility, disc, coursing, and more, all involving our dogs. We do all these things together. It's a bit strange because, despite a clear physical attraction between Matt and me, we've never taken our friendship to a romantic level, and I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe it's been a matter of timing or other circumstances. Now, my boyfriend isn't bothered by my friendship with Matt at all. He's not the jealous type and has his own circle of friends. We've never had any arguments or fights over me spending time with other guys. In fact, my boyfriend and Matt get along well and even hang out together from time to time. Here's where things get tricky. Matt and I often engage in passionate debates and discussions, not actual fights, just spirited conversations. My boyfriend, on the other hand, is very passive and doesn't enjoy arguing. His usual response is either agreeing with me or calmly stating his viewpoint and ending the conversation. I admire his ability to avoid conflict, and I've been working on being more open-minded like he is. Now, Matt and I frequently go hiking together, and sometimes my boyfriend joins us, although he's not as outdoorsy as we are, so he occasionally opts out. I always extend enthusiastic invitations to my boyfriend for all our joint activities, except when it's related to work since he has his own job. Recently, we went on an overnight hiking trip with our dogs, and there were some issues with Matt's tent. It just wouldn't stand up properly and kept collapsing. Matt offered to sleep outside, but I suggested he move his sleeping bag into my larger tent since it would accommodate both of us and the dogs. Plus, there was a chance of rain. Both Matt and I found ourselves in an awkward situation, but he agreed to share the tent, and I assumed my boyfriend wouldn't have an issue with it. Earlier that day, Matt had spent quite a bit of time shirtless, and I couldn't help but sneak some glances. I mean, he's in great shape, and I've always been physically attracted to him. I don't know if it was the pent-up energy from that or what, but there was a moment inside the tent where things felt far from innocent. We weren't talking about anything out of the ordinary, but there was definitely a strong tension in the air. It sounds pretty cringy now. I was just feeling incredibly turned on, and maybe I should have left the tent, but I didn't. Eventually, Matt cleared his throat, and we both went to our respective sides of the tent to sleep. I spent the whole night tossing and turning, overwhelmed by guilt, feeling terrible, and still incredibly turned on. The next day went on as usual. Perhaps we were a bit quieter on the way back, but neither of us brought up what had happened. When Matt dropped me off at my house, he gave me a hug, just like he's done countless times before. But this time, it felt different, like it lingered a bit too long. It didn't feel like a friendly hug, and I'll admit, a part of me didn't want it to end. So now, I'm anxiously waiting for my boyfriend to come home, knowing that I have to tell him about what occurred. I just don't know how to begin explaining myself. The guilt is eating me alive, and it feels like I've betrayed my boyfriend and broken his trust when it comes to Matt.